This week, I'm all spiffied up because it is the end of 2020 and I want to talk about its biggest story. So let's go ahead together as a people and check it out. And welcome to another Sensational Sunday. This is Mike, your host this morning, and this is Mike Techs It Out, where I talk about the latest in tech and gaming. And on Sensational Sundays, I talk about the latest in tech and gaming news. So make sure to subscribe because I do this every Sunday. And then every Wednesday, I usually have a product review or an unboxing, so don't miss it. You can also hit the little bell thing too, that notifies you or something like that. So what am I talking about this week? Well, this is the last Sensational Sunday of 2020, so what better time is there to look back and reflect on this year? And I know, wait, hold on. I know that this year was difficult. Like, it wasn't the greatest year in history, worldwide, like as a whole. Like, this was probably one of the worst years. Like, it was so bad that even the comments of the asteroids were like, you know what? We just gonna go ahead and turn around and come back later because they are just not having the best year. Even the aliens were like, we ain't going, we wanted to pay y'all a visit, but it's just looking rough right there. It's looking rough in the whole area, as in the whole planet. So we just not gonna even go there. Like if E.T., the movie E.T., if it was shot in 2020, it would have been like 2 minutes long because he would have just called collect from a payphone. He would be like, oh, hell no, get me off of this planet. He would just call collect and do the thing where you use like the little greeting to get your free message across so you don't actually have to pay for the call. But like, collect call from, get me the hell off this planet. Do you accept the charges? That's how bad 2020 was. So, yes, I understand. It was a terrible year, but for tech and gaming, I think that there are a lot of things that happened that were really good this year, and that's what I want to talk about. So, I want to talk about some of the biggest announcements and biggest news from this year that will have an impact on us going forward. So, I'm not talking about all the news, like everything that happened. I'm just specifically looking at things that I think will impact us in the upcoming years. So let's start off with some gaming news, and that is Half-Life Alyx came out this year on Steam VR. So Steam VR is pretty much playable on any VR headset that connects to a PC because they support a wide variety of headsets. But it added almost 1 million new users to VR when it came out. And the reason that I think that this is significant is it's the first time we've really seen a big AAA game done in VR and done the right way. Like, this was really an experience that can only be played in VR, and it's best experienced in VR. And it's a full fleshed out story, it's a full fleshed out game, and it's very fun. There wasn't any compromises as far as like the length of the game or the story. Like, it had that big production budget behind it. It also helps with the Oculus Quest 2 launch this year at $300. I think that's also going to help VR catch on. But the reason Half-Life Alyx is significant, I really think that this is going to be either the moment where publishers are like, you know what, it might be worth investing and building a VR title from the ground up, because look what Valve did with Half-Life Alyx. They added almost 1 million people, 1 million new headsets. So, maybe it's time for us to hop in there, or it'll be like, okay, well, they put all this money into this project, it didn't really pay off in the end. So I think when we look back at this moment in a few years, it's either going to be the moment where people realize that VR is worth investing in, or they're just going to look at it and be like, you know what, it's not worth it. And then it'll still be like a weird, like, niche thing on PC, or it'll turn into like a Facebook virtual chat thing, which I really hope doesn't happen because I love VR personally. You know what else happened in gaming that's definitely the future of gaming? Project xCloud and Luna launching this year. So I know last year Stadia launched and it got kind of like a lukewarm reception because, let's be honest, and I've said this several times, I don't think people want to buy games that you stream. I don't think they want to own it because it just doesn't feel the same as having like a physical copy or even a digital copy that you download, on your local machine. It's like, if this copy goes away, then you're just not going to have access to it anymore. So I thought Google's model was kind of stupid as far as gaming, but here come Microsoft and Amazon kind of getting it right. So Project xCloud, you have the games that are available on Microsoft's Game Pass service. Like, most of them are already up there to stream on your mobile device. And then with Project Luna, you have your base plan, and then you have subscriptions. Like, you can get subscriptions to certain additional services like Ubisoft games, and then you can just add on to your subscription. So I think the subscription model is definitely the way to go. And we saw this functioning. Like, it's not perfect. Neither of the services are perfect. I have tried both, but they're both good enough where, as far as like owning a game console, It's not necessary if you don't really care that much. Like, let's say if there's just a few games you want to play, you could probably get away with one of these services. Of course, they're still in beta right now, but I really think that this is the future of gaming, like I said multiple times. And that doesn't mean that game consoles or gaming PCs are going to go away. I just think that this could become the mainstream option for most people, considering that the tech is already pretty good and is only going to get better. So to me, these were landmark announcements in the future of gaming. And then on top of that, Microsoft also bought Bethesda. So Microsoft buying Bethesda could be a pre-runner to what's next in cloud gaming, because let's say Amazon decides that they want to buy up some companies so that way they have exclusive content on their service. It could be kind of like the Netflix versus HBO Max versus Hulu type of thing, where they might start buying companies in order to have exclusive content. But I think that's going to further feed this whole cloud gaming beatdown and fight between these companies. And while we're on the topic of gaming, this really has been an awesome year for gaming, kind of, because the PS5 and the Xbox Series X launched. I mean, granted, they sold out within like 3 seconds and then continue to sell out within 3 seconds every time they're available, but they did launch. And of course, this is an important event because we don't get new consoles all the time. I will say tech-wise that these are probably the biggest consoles to come out since like the PS2 and the original Xbox. And I know that's a big statement to say, but we really haven't seen major leaps in console tech in a long time. And the fact that these came out and they were kind of ahead of what you could get on PC at the time really says a lot, because they're bringing ray tracing at an affordable price. And Nvidia had their ray tracing cards out since 2018, but unless you're getting the higher end cards, they were barely playable. And even those cards, it was like you might get acceptable frame rates with ray tracing on, but it's just not ready for the mainstream yet. So these new consoles bringing that to the mainstream, and also them allowing games to load assets directly from like the super fast SSD, which is now coming to PC as well. So we're actually seeing a situation for the first time in a long time where the console is bringing in new features and setting trends that we haven't seen on PC, because typically when the console comes out, it's like, oh, you know, I've already been doing this for like 6 months on PC, but now everybody on PC is feeling like they're a little bit behind. And speaking of that, we did get new graphics cards around the same time the consoles came out. We got the Nvidia 30 series. AMD just launched the 6800 or the 6000 series. And just when we thought like there's no way you can build a reasonably priced PC to compete with the Xbox and PS5, that's when Nvidia drops its 30 series, especially something like the RTX 3070, which has similar performance to the RTX 2080, which a few months ago was a $1,300 card. And this new card is only $500. So they literally took their top end card and brought it all the way down to like a somewhat affordable price. Like if you're building like a $1,000 to $1,500 PC, that's not an unreasonable price for a graphics card. So finally, like you can get playable ray tracing on PC. So this generation leap as far as graphics on PC was insane. So between the PS5, the Xbox, these new graphics cards, like the generational leap this year was crazy. And this is definitely going to change the way that we game, because ray tracing is affordable, which means that a lot of other games will have it. I think in like 3 to 4 years, like if a game comes out without ray tracing, we might be like, well, that's weird. Why don't they have ray tracing? And then we just shame them. Like, no, go fall into a volcano until you add ray tracing. Don't actually say that to anybody. That's mean. That's mean. I didn't mean it. So yeah, once more of these consoles and graphics cards get into people's hands, which I think they will very soon, developers will actually have a reason to put ray tracing in the game or do the work for it, because people actually have the technology to take advantage of it readily available. There's one other thing I'd like to bridge into while we're still on the subject of gaming, and that is Fortnite versus Apple. If you follow my channel, you know that I covered this for a few weeks because they were going back to back with the hands, and I was like, please stop fighting. It's still ongoing right now. But the reason that I think that this is a big deal, if you haven't followed the story, basically Fortnite tried to add their own payment method in, which is against Apple's policy, and charge less money if you use their payment method versus using the Apple Pay, because Apple takes like 30% of each of those transactions, and they wanted to bypass that, which Apple doesn't allow if you take payments on their store. So they snuck it in unauthorized. Apple pulled the game. They tried to pull like all their developer accounts and everything, which got blocked in court. And technically they're suing them and Google as a duopoly, basically saying that because they're both charging 30%, and that way they're locking the price in, or locking the prices in for developers and forcing them to pay this. Apple has recently lowered their fees for anybody that makes under $1 million, or any developer makes under $1 million a year, which is like a very small percentage of the developers on the App Store, but they're trying to change their policies. Basically, Epic launched a whole campaign. They even did like a Fortnite ad against Apple. It was really immature and stupid. The way that Epic acted, it was really hard for me to sympathize with them, especially because they violated the rules and got the game pulled themselves. And now they're suing, which was obviously their plan because they had the ad ready to go. It was bad. It was a stupid ad. The reason I think this is a big deal is because there are a bunch of things challenging the way that these app stores work, especially Apple, where they have this lockdown ecosystem. I think one or two things are going to happen. If Apple wins this and wins the majority of these lawsuits that are against them right now, it's pretty much going to be like, well, you play by their rules, or you have to do a web app or just not be in the app store, pretty much, which is pretty much on iOS as a web app. On Google, like on Android phones, it's sideloading the app, which is what they originally did with Fortnite, because it was also pulled from the Google Play Store because they pulled the same thing there, and that's also against their rules. So it's either going to turn into like they're going to be forced to change, which would actually change the way or what apps are available on the platform, or it could. That means a lot more apps for us. It could also change some of their other policies to make it more difficult to even get apps to the store to try to combat it. But if they do win, like if Apple does win and it stands, then we're going to see a lot more of people doing web apps and people sideloading apps like on Android, which right now isn't the norm. But like for instance with Project Luna, because Apple's App Store guidelines doesn't allow game streaming services, they had to do a web app. And honestly, I went to the site and it was like, click here to add the web app, and it was like nothing. So as long as there's an easy way to communicate with the customers how to do it, I could see this becoming more of the norm. So that's why I added this to the list, because I think no matter how it turns out, it will change things in the future. And while I'm on the subject of Apple, one thing that they did this year that I'm sure is going to become a terrible trend, just like when they removed the headphone jack, which didn't bother me personally, but it was one of those things that everybody picked up on. Just like when they started selling the iPhone 10 at $1,000, and everybody was like, oh, that's so expensive. And then like a year or two later, now everybody has their $1,000 flagship phone along with their lower $700-800 one. So yes, the next thing, the thing that Apple did this year was they removed the charging brick from the box. Like they don't ship phones with charging bricks anymore. And unfortunately, I think this is going to become an industry standard now that Apple's done it, because Apple was like, you know what, we're just going to do it. And then everybody's going to wait to see how it shakes out. And they're going to be like, did they get away with it? And they're like, we're going to go ahead and do that too because of the environment. Yeah, because of the environment. The environment. We're taking the chargers out too. So I think that that's going to become an industry trend, unfortunately. I don't personally agree with that. The headphone jack thing I didn't care about because I always use Bluetooth headphones anyway, or I have for years. But this, I'm like, you know, that's probably not a great thing, especially if you have a new user. Like, let's say this is their first phone ever, which is going to happen. I mean, you know, there's new people that come of age every day to buy a phone. Well, not even buy a phone, but like old enough where their parents might want to give them a phone or something like that. Or maybe they're buying their first phone and then it's like, dang, now I got to spend an extra $20 to get a charging brick. And maybe they didn't even know that. And then they got to go back to the store to buy a charging brick because they're going to be charged a new phone. So I think it just creates a bad customer experience. Some fashion, I understand why they're doing it, because it's like after you have a charging brick, they do kind of just add up and then you just have them everywhere, kind of like I do. But I still think that this kind of sucks, but I do see that this is going to be a trend going forward. So just get ready for it. Speaking of something else that's probably going to change, the AirPods Max just launched, which my unboxing video was last week, so go check that out if you haven't already seen it. And of course, subscribe. But yes, the AirPods Max launched at $550. And the only reason I'm even including this in there is because they're $550. And it's not that headphones, even wireless, like over-the-ear headphones, haven't existed at that price. I just think in most consumers' mind, when they think of like, oh, I'm going to get the best headphones, and look it up, and it's like the Bose 700s or the Bose QC35s or the Sony WH-1000XM4s, and they're all in this $300 to $400 price range. I think that was like the most that most people were like willing to pay for what they considered good headphones. But the AirPods Max launched, right? And then they're back ordered for like 2 months, like almost instantly or within a day or so. And it just shows you like it's possible to launch headphones at this price to a mainstream consumer and have them actually buy them. So what do I think is going to happen? I think that we're going to start to see more competition at this price point. Like I said, it's already existed. It's a category that's already existed. Above that, you start to get into the really niche audio stuff where you start to get amplifiers and you're talking about wired audio and all that stuff. We ain't going there. But I think that there is a higher tier that Apple just entered, because the build quality is excellent. It's not plastic like most of the other headphones that are in that $300 to $400 price range. But I think showing, these companies like Bose and Sony that there's interest that people will buy in this price range, I think that they might still offer their $300 to $400 model, but maybe their flagship model is going to be at that $500 to $600 price point. I could see this becoming a trend. And as long as they offer like a cheaper alternative that still sounds good, which they will, they already do now. They have headphones up and down the stack. But I could see this like being the new norm for like higher end headphones, because Apple went ahead and launched some $550 headphones. The final story, which is also Apple related, is the announcement and the launch of the first M1 Apple products, like the laptop and the desktop. I remember sitting there watching the announcement weeks after I bought my Intel MacBook Air, and I was like, okay, well, this seems cool, but I'm kind of doubty about it. I don't know what the performance is going to be like in real life. And then these new notebooks come out, and the desktop, the Mac Mini, it's technically a desktop. And while they are lower end computers, they like completely destroy everything that's in their class, and they still run x86 apps just fine, like the backwards compatibility mode stuff. It works just fine. They're like the best MacBook Air they've ever made, and people are just going crazy for it. And I'm just like, man, I didn't think they were going to pull it off. I thought that it was going to come out and be okay, maybe be comparable to the performance that they had previously, but I didn't think that it was going to be that much ahead of the competition, like as far as the lower end mobile chips. And that was one of the reasons that like their old MacBook, like the really, really skinny one, didn't work, because the chip that Intel had for them, the M5 or the M3, like it just wasn't, it was super slow. It wasn't that efficient. It didn't work with a notebook that size. Now they can go back if they want to and make the MacBook again. Like they were able to do all this stuff just with their own chips. And the reason I think this is going to change things, like clearly it's going to change things for Apple. Like obviously this is going to be the architecture they use going forward. We're probably going to see a more powerful desktop variant. Who knows what the Mac Pro is going to end up looking like, because right now everything's integrated into the CPU, including the graphics card and RAM. So if they did a Mac Pro like that, there would be no reason for the machine to be that big, unless they gave you the option, like unless they're going to create a separate graphics card themselves and give you options to upgrade, which would also be weird, and then do separate RAM. I don't know what they're going to do with the Mac Pro, which is not a concern because they probably won't update that for like 4 or 5 years anyway. But yeah, this is going to change things, because on the Windows side, on the PC side, there's just been a struggle to get ARM-based processors working in a way that makes sense. Like I had a Surface RT back in the day. If you don't remember that, that was like when the Surface 1 came out. There was a completely mobile version of it that just ran a stripped down version of Windows where you couldn't install anything aside from what was in the App Store. And it was really slow. It kind of sucked to use. I thought it was a really cool concept, but that was like my first experience using like a mobile processor on what was kind of like a full computer, and it was garbage. And even like when they've done later Surface products using mobile processors or anything just in general, it's just been garbage. And Apple comes out right and they just nail it right off the bat, showing us that these chips can be used in full like computer, desktop, and laptop experiences, and get phenomenal battery life and lower thermals, like what everybody wants. They somehow figured it out. So I think that this really could change the way that computers are made going forward. There's gonna be a real struggle on the Windows side for them to figure out how to match the efficiency with the mobile chip and the performance the way that Apple has. And it might be years before they catch up, but I definitely think that this will change computing in the future. And that's going to conclude today's video. Let me know if there's a story that you think that I should have covered. Like I said, I was kind of focusing on things that I felt like were going to change stuff going forward after this year. So if there's anything you missed, or if you agree or disagree, let me know. And make sure, if you enjoyed this video, to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe, and always do at least 2 things at the same time. Peace. All right, 2020, I'm leaving. Well, I'm going to be back on Wednesday, but after that, I'm leaving. I'm done with you. I'm done. Bye, 2020. Bye.